Hello ladies and gentlemen, this is Blue Maxima, and let's hope I get this take right this time. So, I'm here to talk about Steins Gate Zero, but there's a little bit of a sort of spanner in the works going on in that I never talked about the original Steins Gate in any particular amount of detail or length. Well, actually no, that's not entirely true, but at the same time it kind of is. So, originally I made a video on this game and it said Steins Gate Vita gameplay, and that's exactly what it was. I was just showing like how the systems worked and all that. But I didn't actually get much further into the game than I did in my video, and my video I only got like half an hour in at most, so it was kind of like, I only just recently after I heard that Steins Gate Zero was coming, I did feel kind of bad about it, so I went back and I played the original Steins Gate all the way through, and at the time, this was a couple of months ago by the way, I was entirely disappointed with myself because I was like, shit, why didn't I play this through when it came out so I could actually like talk about it? Because back when I finished it, I did want to talk about it because it was a bloody good game. And I'm not entirely sure why I didn't do a video on it right then and there. I think it was because I had a bunch of shit coming out at the same time. It was like 2 weeks later at the time, and 2 weeks after I'd finished the game by the time I could actually get a video done on it, and I was like, nah, I really shouldn't, and I decided not to. And now I'm going to be doing a video on both games, in which one of those games I can barely remember playing, even though it was only a few months ago. And the fact that I really liked it just kind of makes that worse. So, I'm going to try and talk about as much of the original Steins Gate as I remember, because I never got an opportunity to do that on this channel, and then we'll move on and we'll talk about some Steins Gate Zero stuff, because the way Steins Gate Zero works is that with Steins Gate Zero, it starts from halfway through the true ending of the original Steins Gate. So the way that is a thing is, I'd rather get Steins Gate out of the way first to convince you to go and play it, because to talk about Steins Gate Zero will be bringing along spoilers from the original Steins Gate. So that's a thing. So I figure I might as well get started on talking about the original Steins Gate then. So, Steins Gate is a pure visual novel. There's no minigames like in 999 or VLR or Danganronpa. Nothing like that. There's no escape the room, there's no minigames, there's nothing. It's pure visual novel. It's a time travel plot starring the mad scientist Huon Kiyoma, aka Okabe Rintaro, a guy who is like a kid living in a man's body, and he's got this bunch of weird friends who are about as strange as he is, and they all go on this weird time travel plot together where they have to fight off conglomerates and figure out how exactly they're going to save their friends, because the original accident that created what turns out to be their time machine actually ends up leaving them with the choice of whether or not they want to save one of two of their friends. So there's this whole thing going on in the background where you have to choose which friend you want to save, and at the same time you get to talk with both friends a lot. So the whole thing is about figuring out who you want to save. And jump cut because I almost opened my mouth too much. So, the whole thing is figuring out about who you want to save. And the thing is, every single character in this game is extremely lovable, so you don't want to put either one of them to their deaths, or any of them for that matter. They've all got their own unique quirks and traits, and they've all got their own backstories, and almost every single character in the game gets their own unique ending that helps them put a little bit more depth into their character. And that is the best thing that this game could do, because you end up having to make a lot of tough decisions along the way. And that's good, because all the characters are some of the best characters I have, met in any sort of, video game medium in general. They are some of the best. I mean, this is a visual novel we're talking about. They have to be at least good to great, and these guys are anywhere between great to amazing. So, there you go. The writing, of course, as well, is fantastic for the most part. It gets a little bit strange when it starts talking about things like, what's the word I'm looking for? Like violence and stuff like that. But then again, with violence, there's only so many ways you can do violence. But it's still a little bit weird, but it doesn't really, knock anything off, really. It doesn't really reduce your enjoyment or anything of the game, so it's not that bad. What might reduce your enjoyment of the game is the slow pacing. This game takes a few hours to get going, and they do need to set up a bunch of the consequences out over a really long period. once you get to the point where all the consequences have been set up and everything just starts tumbling down like a few rocks that start an avalanche, you'll start really enjoying yourself and you'll be along for the ride for the whole time. All the endings will start popping up and you can finally figure out what makes this game so bloody good. But again, it's a really long climb to get there. It's a lot like Persona 4 Golden, except when Persona 4 Golden goes for 80 hours, but you need to get over the initial hump of like the first 10. Steins Gate goes for something like 15 at maximum speed, and you have to get over like half of that in order to get over that big hump. So if you don't like games that are really, really slow starting, you probably want to avoid Steins Gate, but that is basically the only major problem with it. Like, honest to God, the rest of the experience is really well wrapped up. They've done a great job in just making it really enjoyable to go through. And as I said before, the characters are fantastic. The plot doesn't have that many holes in it. In fact, I can't recall one massive hole in it whatsoever, and anything else I've probably just missed. So that's the thing. The plot itself is really good, and it's a time travel plot, and you fuck with time a lot, and it does make sense at the end. Like, don't get me wrong. Very easy to screw up a time travel plot, but they've done a very good job in making sure it's nice and solid, and yet you can't really poke any holes in it, which is great, because that means it's all the more engaging when you don't notice any sort of holes coming from it. So yeah, that's all great. It's got really good CG. The art is really nice. It really lends to the world. The characters all look unique, and you can tell them apart just by looking at them, obviously, and they've done a really good job with like the CG that shows actions and stuff like that, and that's all well and good. And there's also the backgrounds. The story takes place... I know I just said the backgrounds twice. That's a little bit strange. That's going to sound weird, but whatever. The backgrounds and stuff, the whole thing takes place inside Akihabara, for the most part, which is the nerd district of Japan, and there's background shots of all of it, and it all looks really nice, and it really does just draw you into the world. There is, of course, music as well, but I just kind of started to tune it out, if you want me to be perfectly honest, so, you know, not the worst thing in the world, but I mean, if it's there and I'm not entirely annoyed by it, I'm fine with it, more or less, so there you go. And there's a bunch of cultural references and stuff as well. The game takes place in 2010, which is not that far back, but at the same time, you'll be a little bit surprised when you open up your cell phone, which is one of the things you can do in the game, and you'll notice that it's like one of those old flip phones. You will be surprised, because again, 2010, this was like 2-3 years after the original iPhone came out, or something like that. So it's just a little strange to go that far back, but I mean, it's really not a problem, not in the slightest. And there is, as I said before, it's basically a straight shot plot where the character endings will branch off from the middle like a very strange tree. So it's a good plot, don't get me wrong. It's just sometimes it's a little bit annoying to get to the end, because what you have to do is you get text messages from some of the characters, and one of your interactions with the characters in particular will determine whether or not you can unlock the true ending. And you have to get every single text message that comes in from this person correct, otherwise you won't be able to get through the true ending. So basically, I would fully recommend picking up a guide, more or less. I mean, this is the game that kind of convinced me to not bother with looking through the games myself to try and find the true ending. So yeah, I ended up just, getting a guide and going through it like that. So, go to all the character endings, then go for the main ending with the true ending stuck on the end of that, and you will be fine. And there's a bunch of things like cultural references too. Like, there's a button that you can press that'll bring up a list of tips, and when you're reading the actual dialogue, it'll flash words in blue, and it'll give you a tip for those words, which will define them for you, so you can read through and learn what all these particular things are. And some of them are obvious fakes of real world brands and real world organizations and stuff like that. So you probably do want to read through those tips just to make sure you understand what's going on, especially if you don't get the cultural reference. And there are a couple of other ones here and there as well. One of the characters browses 2chan on the regular, which is kind of great. And just the interactions with all the characters that you have throughout the story is what makes it worth it. It's more about the journey more than the destination. And getting to know all those characters is what makes Steins Gate so worth it. And you'll probably want to kill yourself at the end of it, because it's such a depressing game once it gets to the character endings. Seriously, it's one of the bloody worst games for just, pulling at your heartstrings. It's not great. Not in that sense. So if you're emotionally unstable, avoid this game like the plague. But it is well worth your time. Absolutely. Like, seriously. Go out and get the original Steins Gate immediately, if you can. Just get it somewhere and play it, even if it isn't on Vita. The Vita version is fine. You can only press, like, the X button to get through the main story scenes, but you can do things like turn off people's voices if they annoy you, and there's a bunch of options there as well. So, that's all well and good. It's more than playable. It's just a little bit of a pain in the ass sometimes, but nothing too deal-breaking or anything like that. So, yeah. Absolutely worth your time. Go grab that as soon as you possibly can, and we'll start getting into Steins Gate Zero stuff right after this Mayushi break. Alright, so now that we're back from that little break, let's start talking about Steins Gate Zero, and the plot spoilers for the original Steins Gate will start here, more or less. So, if you haven't played through the original Steins Gate yet, stop watching here, please. Go buy that, go play that, go do whatever you're going to do with that. So, 3, 2, 1, there's your warning. So this game, Steins Gate Zero, is basically exactly the same as the original Steins Gate. So the idea of this one's plot is that in the middle of the true ending of the original Steins Gate, where he's making the attempt to save both the people instead of just having to pick one or the other, he eventually, Okabe Rintaro, the main protagonist of the last game, he just loses his mind, basically. He has a nervous breakdown, and he decides not to go through with the rest of the plot. And then this new one starts with the idea that, considering that he didn't go and prevent what was going to happen in the first game, it's eventually going to lead into World War III, and the new plot is trying to prevent World War III. And there's a new plot and new characters along with it, which is alright. There's not as much time travel fuckery with this one, though, which is a little bit of a problem for me personally, because I liked the idea of being able to play around with the time travel in the original game and all that, even if it was just, it was obviously just like preset circumstances and all that, just, you can't really decide what's going on. Just going down the different routes to play around with time, though, that was interesting. It really was, and this game doesn't have that as much. All the times that time travel does happen in this game, it happens just without your control, and you do end up getting thrown around all the different timelines a bit, and it does get kind of confusing. It does feel like you're along for the ride more than anything else. There are a few times you can make decisions. They have changed the way the story branching works for this one. So the idea is that there is no more like straight shot with character endings going off to the side. It's actually more of like an actual like branch. Like, you'll go through and you'll get the opportunity to answer a call from the new AI droid Amadeus, which is Marquise Karisu, of course, and that determines whether or not what ending you go down. There is also this new text messaging overhaul, but it's basically the same thing as the first game, where you could text people to get their opinion on things, and they didn't really change it up. They just made it look fancier. That means nothing anymore. It's all whether or not you answer the calls from Amadeus. And it has all these other different endings, and they're all different timelines, and different things happen down them, and it really does feel a little bit strange, just a little bit unbalanced towards being a bit out of the way and wacky. But overall, this whole new scenario with the different AI going on in the background and having this focus on rediscovering the secrets that were lost from the first game and trying to prevent World War III in the process is a really cool idea, and it does work. And the plot itself is more or less fine. Like, they've kind of come to an idea that figuring out what happened in doing what happened in the first game seems almost impossible at this point. It is basically its whole own universe. This game is its whole own universe at this point, which is an interesting way to do it. There are a couple of new characters, as I said before, but the problem with the new characters is that they have more focus on the new ones and not as much focus on the old ones. Like, all the original characters come back. You've got Faris, you've got Daru, you've got Mayuri, of course. You've got Marquise, who gets a few flashbacks, and, obviously you get to talk to her through the AI droid sort of thing going on and stuff like that. And the thing is, the problem with them is that you don't get to see them very often, for the most part. Like, you don't get any sort of special character endings with any of them except Mayuri. And even then, it's just like, they don't do much. Like, not really. Like, they seem to be there for the grand sense of the plot, except towards the end, roughly, for just, like, having stuff to do with the plot, like trying to fix what happened at the beginning of the game. So it kind of sucks, especially when it comes to Faris and Lukaku. Did you like those two? Well, this game's not for you, because they do stuff all in this game, like, seriously. You'll get, like, 1 or 2 scenes specifically for their character development that last about 10 minutes overall for both of them, and then that's it. That's unfortunate, because you don't get to talk to them again for very long, which, again, it sucks. It really does. The character development that does happen, like, you get some with Daru, you get a fair amount from Mayushi, and they're both great. Like, seriously, they've done a good job making the original characters be developed along the lines of the original Steins Gate, and it does feel great to, you know, have them along again. And of course, Marcuse does get a fair bit more development as well, despite the fact that she's dead in this entire storyline. And that's all well and good. It's just the new characters don't really get the same sort of thing going for them, and they're nowhere near as unique, which I don't like. Like, there's one who basically looks exactly like Marcuse for no bloody reason, and it's weird. It's really strange, but other than that, there's nothing really that interesting about her. There's the 2 scientists, the little girl and the tall man, and they don't really have anything interesting about them either, except one is trying to be the Salieri to Marcuse's Amadeus, and that's basically her entire character. And there is a couple of other people as well who show up that basically have no relevance in the plot except to be there every time that they need more hands on deck, which is kind of disappointing, honestly. The whole story does feel a little bit bloated. Like, the whole game takes something like 15 to 16 hours to get through at full speed, and that's including skipping scenes that they don't let you skip the second time around, despite the fact that you've basically read the entire thing, and it kind of sucks. So it just feels a little bit bloated and unnecessary, and I feel like cutting down the character roster a little bit might have actually helped, like, make the game a little bit more of a straight shot. Instead, it just feels a bit wishy-washy, especially with the newer characters. But the original characters that are here and do whatever particular roles they have in the story, they still work all right. It's just, you know, you don't get to see them that much. And the story itself does have a couple of contradictions with the original plot that they do kind of retcon by showing you a different angle on the same scene and showing that they were there all along. So I'm guessing that this game is going to be full-on canon. And while I wouldn't normally ask whether or not there's going to be a third Steins Gate game, I mean, this is technically the 4th, but I don't think the other 2 are canon. So if there's going to be like a third Steins Gate game or a 5th, depending on which one you want to count, I don't know how they're going to plan on doing another sequel, but at the same time, they managed to crowbar a sequel out of the original, so who knows, maybe they will do another one, and hopefully they'll let us see the original characters again, or at least make the new characters slightly more interesting. There's also a couple of plot holes that don't show up again, and the main one I can think of is the religious extremists. Like, the religious extremists show up, like, once, and then they never show up again. That's a bit of a weird plot hole. And there's a couple of other minor things like that too, which I won't bring up in case I really start getting into spoiler territory, but it's it's a bit strange like that. So the story itself is more or less fine. It does do the job, and it does feel like you're playing through a Steins Gate sequel. It's just the characters are a little bit disappointing, and the characters that I do like, you don't get enough time with. That's a pain. That's a real pain to deal with. There is another thing, though, that is worth bringing up, and that's the concept of fan service. There's a lot more of it in this game than there was in the previous one, and the weird thing is, they seem to be really open to the idea, because whenever they start playing this really weird, hokey tune, it means that there's going to be a fan service event for, like, the next 10 minutes, and it's a little bit strange, I gotta say. I'm not entirely sure what made them balance the scales more towards the fan service this time, but I can't really say. I mean, I know the original Steins Gate had a couple of moments like that, but they've added a fair few more onto this new one, and it's just a bit weird, just a touch, you know? So the plot itself does work, other than all of that. It's just, you know, it does definitely not have the same sort of mirror shine polish that the original Steins Gate has. It does have things like the tips that are back as well, and they have given everyone, like, new CG, except for when they go back and reference events that happened in Steins Gate 1, they do get the old CG back out, which is a little bit of a weird thing, considering that you can change from the Steins Gate 0 CG to the Steins Gate original CG, and you'll be surprised just at how quickly it can happen for some reason. Like, there's one scene where it happens for no particular reason, and I'm not entirely sure why. It's like they just put the wrong CG in there for some reason. It's a little bit odd, but it's still as nicely presented as the original was at the very least, and, well, that's a nice thing. And it does have that sort of overall mystery going on where you're trying to figure out who's who and who's doing what, and of course, there is some time travel fuckery. The results do change between the different timelines, and there is like 4 or 5 of them, just like in the original game, so you do get to see, like, the different ways that World War III starts, and it is just overall, as a concept, it works, and overall, the big picture does work. It's just all these little things that do kind of get under the skin and don't really make this as superior a sequel. Let me try that again. It doesn't really make it a superior sequel to the original Steins Gate, but at the same time, if you can come into it with the mindset that it's an alternate ending sort of thing, like, it just branches off from the original and it's just its own, like, self-contained thing. I mean, if you can keep that in mind while you're playing it, that's fine. It's just if they make a third one and they realize that Steins Gate 0 kind of changed the canon and they have to rely on the fact that Steins Gate 0 exists, well, who knows? It is worth playing by it once you've played the original Steins Gate and once you've liked the original Steins Gate. Like, if you really liked the original Steins Gate and just want to see more of the same people, however minor that does happen, you are more than welcome to come and play Steins Gate 0. Me, personally, despite the fact that I love the original Steins Gate, I wouldn't recommend it at full price. Like, let it drop to, like, $20 or something on sale, just because it's not as good as the original Steins Gate. It's just, it does do what it does all right. I just wish that the original characters had more time and that it was a little bit more, not so much internally consistent as much as it was just a little bit more polished. So, yeah. So, there is a couple of other things. It is about as slow as the original, plot-wise. You do need a few hours to get into it to set up all the different consequences and such. And, of course, this time you do have to go down the other endings and not just go straight to the true ending in order to, get there straight away. You do have to play through the game at least twice. So, you do have to do that. And if you didn't hear me before, the trick is Ryan has nothing to do with it, which is the text message thing. It's all whether or not you answer Amadeus, despite the fact that the game insists that it stops and lets you, despite the fact that it stops and lets you reply to the line messages. No, that's not what you need to do. And it took me about 15 to 16 hours, as I said before, to beat on full speed, which is a fair bit long, and it'll probably take you a lot longer if you're going through slowly. So, yeah, I'm not entirely sure what else I have to say about it. It's alright as a sequel and a sort of alternate ending thing. I'm just hoping that when they bring along Steins Gate 3 or whatever the bloody hell they plan to do next, they don't rely on the fact that Steins Gate exists in order to... they don't rely on the fact that Steins Gate 0 exists in order to make an actual sequel or something like that. Or maybe they'll just bring over the... I believe there were 2. One was a set of side stories and the other one was a romance, a spin-off, but I'm not entirely sure off the top of my head. I'd have to go and do a little bit of research, but... yeah, there you go. That was a few minutes about Steins Gate and Steins Gate 0. I hope I've at least convinced you to go play the original Steins Gate. As for this one, it's fine if you want to wait for a discount, and it's got a fair few problems of its own that doesn't make it better than the original, but it's still a nice experience. It's still nice to drop back in and see what all the old gang are doing in a different situation. And there's a bunch of different character developments that are well worth the time to look at. It is still... It doesn't tug at your heartstrings as much as the original Steins Gate does, but it still gets a few whoppers in there from time to time, and it's quite nice, especially towards the end. And they leave the ending actually pretty open in comparison to the original game, where it's basically one shot done and dusted. But, well, I'm just wondering how they plan to handle on having an open ending like this. I mean, I can't really say, can I? Because that'd be going a bit into spoiler territory, how particularly open it is, but... yeah, nevertheless, it is still a decent game, and it is worth your time to go through. It's saying that, unless you're a really big fan of Steins Gate, and if you are, you've probably already bought the game and you didn't even bother watching this video, you've probably gone and spent your $40 on it already, but in case you were just waiting for me to say something about it, which I'm not entirely sure why you were, because I never really gave away any impression that I was going to do Steins Gate Zero outside of like one weekly update, but there you go. Anyone who isn't a huge fan of the original Steins Gate probably won't get much out of this one either, but if you did like the original Steins Gate and you wanted to see basically more of that, just not as good, Steins Gate Zero will do the trick. That's pretty much all I've got to say on the matter, so I think I'll just end this video off here before I go off onto any more ridiculously long rants, because I don't really need to. The game's fine by itself, there's just a bunch of little niggles with it. So, this has been Blue Maxima, and I'll see you all next time.